God intercedes on behalf of those nations who humble themselves before him. Welcome back to Fasting Food Faith. I'm Brianne Sims. All right.
I'm Dr. Sam Sims, nurse anesthesiologist.
And today we're talking about
prayer and fasting proclamations.
Yeah.
So
it's super interesting.
It is super interesting. And I think a lot of people think of it as just something that happened in the past. And so we're going to obviously talk about that. But in America, it's happened so many times in our history, which I didn't even realize.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, there's a biblical precedence for calling for days of prayer and fasting and repenting before God and calling on him and his intervention. And so realizing that that's been a part of our history of our country is so cool. But it just doesn't ever get talked about.
No.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to go through these. I think you'll be surprised about how many times this has happened in America. So we'll start with George Washington in 1799. He proclaimed a day of fasting and humiliation, basically humbling yourself. They had different wordings back then. Remember, things meant different things. And prayer to acknowledge the nation's sins, seek forgiveness, ask for divine intervention during a time of political and military challenges. 1799. Then John Adams also did it in 1799 and in 1800. He proclaimed 2 times days of prayer and fasting and seek divine protection for a nation during a quasi-war with France to reflect the country's dependence on God. This is after the Revolutionary War, and France was our allies, and so now we've had some difficulty with our allies. James Madison, for the War of 1812, did it in 1812, proclaimed a public day for humiliation, fasting, and prayer to acknowledge the nation's sins and seek divine guidance and assistance. Zachary Taylor did it in 1849, and this is when the first Friday in August was observed as the United States as Fasting, Humiliation, and Prayer Day.
Wow.
So I wonder if that's still, we should look to see if that's still the case.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, so first Friday in August, fasting, humiliation, humbling, and prayer. Abraham Lincoln did it 3 times. We're not surprised about that because that was a rough time for the country. In 1861, 1862, and 1863, he proclaimed multiple days of fasting and humiliation and prayer to the Civil War. They aimed was to seek for divine favor and repentance for the nation's sins and healing of the country. And don't we need that now? Healing of the country.
Yeah. It's so good to see. Even back then, they recognized, God as the one who provides all that we need, and that he's the one who needs to intervene in all of these situations. Like we need his intervention. We always do. And just seeing that our country has always been focused on fasting and prayer and basically bending a knee before God and saying, we need your help.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And then we've talked about that. Humbling is also used in the Bible is a term for fasting.
Yeah.
So Andrew Johnson in 1866 proclaimed a day of humiliation, fasting, and prayer to reflect on the nation's sins and seek divine forgiveness and reconciliation after the Civil War. So can you imagine a country divided where there's a lot of hurt feelings? Almost like it is to say, like we have that today. Not we haven't had a civil war, but a lot of hurt feelings were back then, and it certainly was divided. James Garfield in 1881, a day of fasting and prayer after the assassination of President James Garfield. Proclamation aimed to express national mourning and seek divine comfort and guidance. And William McKinley in 1898, day of prayer and fasting during the Spanish-American War, asking for divine assistance, guidance, and protection for the military and the nation. Woodrow Wilson did it 3 times. In 1918, 1919, and 1920 during World War I to seek guidance, support, and unity for the nation during the war effort. Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1933, 1940, 1941, 1943, 1944.
Wow.
For prayer fasting during the Great Depression and World War II, they were aimed at seeking divine guidance, comfort, and strength during times of national crisis and war. Harry Truman proclaimed a day of prayer and fasting following the death of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, expressed mourning and seeking divine guidance during a time of transition. Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1953 and 1954, days of prayer and fasting to seek divine guidance, strength, and unity during the Korean War. John F. Kennedy, 1961, 1962, and 1963, proclaimed multiple days of prayer and fasting after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, and these proclamations were aimed to seek divine guidance, healing, and unity during these challenging times.
Wow.
Nixon, 1969, 1970, 1972, prayer and fasting to seek divine guidance and unity and healing during the Vietnam War and response to national challenges and tragedies. General Ford, he referred to fasting and prayer, but he had 2 days of prayer in the National Prayer Day for 1975 and 1976. Ronald Reagan proclaimed days of prayer and fasting to seek divine guidance, strength, and unity during times of national international challenges in 1983 and 1986. And he did a day of fasting in 1985 to raise funds to combat hunger.
This is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
George H.W. Bush, 1989, proclaimed a day of prayer and thanksgiving to celebrate the bicentennial of the United States Constitution and reflect the nation's blessings and values.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah.
Fasting and praying and telling God thank you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Bill Clinton in 1996 and 1999 proclaimed days of prayer and fasting to seek divine guidance, unity, and healing in response to national tragedies and challenges. George W. Bush in 2001, 2004, 2005, and 2008 proclaimed several days of prayer and fasting, including the day after September 11th attacks, to seek divine guidance, comfort, and strength during times of national crisis and worry. And Donald Trump in 2017 and 2019 proclaimed days of fasting and prayer to seek divine guidance, unity, and healing, which included the day after Hurricane Harvey and for the victims of the COVID-19 pandemic.
And more recently, he's done some big events for the National Day of Prayer.
He does National Day of Prayer, but
This year.
But fasting wasn't specifically mentioned.
Yep.
So, but yes, there's a National Day of Prayer every year. So that's in America.
Mm-hmm.
I think you might find it interesting that in 1588, Queen Elizabeth I declared a day of prayer and fasting during the Spanish Armada crisis.
How interesting.
King Louis XVI in France in 1791 proclaimed a day of fasting and prayer during the French Revolution to seek divine intervention and peace during a period of political and social upheaval. Queen Victoria in 1857 claimed a national day of prayer and fasting in response to the Indian Rebellion of 1857 to seek divine assistance and comfort those affected by the rebellion and restore peace and order. Emperor Hirohito of Japan in 1945 proclaimed a day of prayer and fasting during World War II to seek divine intervention and peace during time of conflict and national crisis. Nelson Mandela in 1994, as the president of South Africa, called for a national day of prayer and fasting to promote unity, healing, and reconciliation in the country after the end of apartheid. Pope John Paul of the Vatican City called for a day of prayer and fasting in response to the sexual abuse scandal within the Catholic Church in 2002 to seek forgiveness, healing, and renewal of the church. The King of Saudi Arabia in 2020 proclaimed a day of prayer and fasting in response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Wow.
So
a lot.
It's not just an American thing. It's a thing that people recognize as a need to seek divine guidance and help.
Yeah.
Prayer and fasting throughout the world and throughout the centuries.
Yeah.
And it's not something something that's new. It's something that's it's like,
Yeah.
it just goes unnoticed.
Yeah, it's very heartening, I guess, to know that people have been fasting and praying over our country, and that even our leaders and our presidents recognize what an important thing it is for our country
And it's not
and for all of its citizens.
it's not an old thing.
No.
Yeah, it's a
It's not
current
just an old thing.
No, it's a current thing.
Yes, it's a
Yeah.
current thing that is happening, and so, yeah, we should be participating in all of these days of fasting and prayer for our nation, and in fact, we should be fasting and praying for our nation
Yep.
as Americans.
Because fasting in the Bible always includes prayer.
Yeah, and God intercedes on behalf of those nations who humble themselves before him, and his word promises his intervention for people who fast and pray and humble themselves before him, because that touches his heart.
Yep. So fast and pray, heal yourself, heal your land.
Thanks for being here. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Fasting Food Faith. We hope it encouraged you to go and fast and pray.
Go fast, pray, and be blessed.